Shalom, and good evening to you, or whatever time of the day it is where you are. Hi, this is Philip Fanssteel with the philipfiles, and today we're going to talk about the P on my this P on my shirt. That's so gross. The P on my shirt. It stands for pathetic. Prophetic, not anywhere close to the same. So it stands for, actually it's just probably stands for my name. I don't know, Philip or Fanssteel or. Yeah, but this blog is going to be on prophecy. Now, prophecy is an interesting thing. My friend John and I, back in 7th and 8th and 9th grade, I remember us reading quite a few prophecy books, Hal Lindsey, Hilton Sutton, others. And of course, at that time, there's a book, 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 88, and the next year, 89 Reasons Why Jesus Come Back in 89. I remember doing that whole time, discussing this with friends and discussing the end times. And of course, most people were certain that Jesus was going to come back in the rapture and snatch us all away. I do believe in the rapture, but not the pre-trib rapture that a lot. But anyway, we'll get into that later. So prophecy is kind of interesting. Well, I heard a preacher a couple years ago. I'm sure he heard this from somebody else, but I don't know where it originated. But my pastor, Gary Hutchison, he was telling us about how prophecy, when God would reveal things to the prophets, it would be a lot like a mountain range. They would see things in the distance, and they would describe it as best that they could, or what God revealed to them. And it reminded me about visiting the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. When you're coming to the Rocky Mountains from Kansas, especially, you're coming to Kansas, great state, love the wheat, all that, but it's flat, especially western Kansas, just flat. And then all of a sudden, in the distance, you see, as you get into Colorado, and very soon after you get into eastern Colorado, you'll see the Rocky Mountains in the distance. Now, at first, they're way out there. And as you get closer, you can start telling that it's the actual mountain range. Stretches north and south as far as you can see. And as you get closer, you can start to tell the differences, and that there are not just one mountain, there's mountains, okay? And then as you get closer, the closer you get to, the more you can distinguish details. Well, so he described prophecy as like a mountain range. The prophets are describing things that they're seeing, but they're not exactly sure. They don't really know exactly the distances between the mountains, all right? And they don't know, so like this mountain range here, this beautiful mountain range, you have 3 mountains, okay? You can start to tell that, but how much distance is between this mountain, and which one's first, this mountain or this mountain? Well, if you kind of, as you draw down, you're like, okay, well, that mountain's first, all right? And this mountain would come before these mountains, like the foothills, if you will, and then you got the mountain range and the peaks back here. Well, when it comes to the end times, the mountain that most people are fascinated with is the Tribulation. And so this video is actually not about the Tribulation. This is a video about some of the mountains that come before the Tribulation. And some of these mountains we've reached. So if this mountain back here, if this is the Tribulation, Tribulation. All right, 7-year tribulation, Daniel's 7 weeks. All right. So the tribulation is back here. Well, a lot of people are concerned with that, and rightfully so. It's going to be a big deal. But we've actually already come to this mountain, right? So this mountain is Israel reborn. The nation of Israel is reborn. This happened in 1948, right? So we've actually already come to this mountain. That one has been accomplished. So a lot of people are like, well, we've been here. Israel was reborn. That's one of the key elements for this to happen. You have to have Israel reborn. But there's a couple other things that have to happen first. And just recently, my mother gave me a book, and she was telling me about this war. Well, actually, before I get to this war, there's another war that people have been talking about lately. And I remember Hilton Sutton and some others discussing this back in the 80s. And this was the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, or the war of Gog and Magog. Most people believe that would be Russia. All right? Russia and its confederates, Iran and some others. So here's the war of Gog and Magog. So you'd have to have this before this, right? And of course, this has to come first. Well, this has come, so you'd expect to find this. Well, in the news, we actually are seeing Russia make an alliance with Iran, and all these countries that will eventually form up this alliance. If you read more about this, and there's a lot out there on the war of Gog and Magog. However, the problem with the war of Gog and Magog is the conditions are not set for it yet. A couple things interesting, not to go into too much depth, but I remember in reading this in Ezekiel 38. This is a peaceful people. People at peace. The nation of Israel at peace. It's very prosperous, has a lot of wealth, and it has no walls. A couple interesting things. Well, when I visited Israel this summer, they had a lot of walls, walls everywhere, and actually they're planning on building more. They're not at peace. There's constant violence. As we were traveling around different areas, we had to be careful, and even some of our group, there's a rocket that came into Tel Aviv while we were there, and not that peaceful. Then when we went down to the border with Gaza, where they just had a war, and they're in the middle of a war with Gaza, not peaceful. Not at peace, with walls, right? And while Israel is prosperous, they're doing well for a nation of 6 million people. They're not exceedingly prosperous. There's no reason why Russia would come up with a confederation of 10 nations to attack Israel right now. There's nothing in it for Russia. It'd be like wolves fighting over a mouse at this point, or maybe a little, but it's not much. Now, but this is, so we have the 3 mountains here. Well, this book my mom introduced me to is called the Psalm 38 War. And I'm reading this, and this is fascinating, because it actually reads Psalm 83, and you'll think you're reading the headlines right now. The nations around Israel, this is the enemies right now, or Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Saudi Arabia, these nations around Israel. Jordan is not an enemy right now, but unfortunately it looks like Jordan's going to jump in there. But what if there's one more mountain we're missing? And this mountain is right here. This mountain is right there. And if there's a third mountain right here, so you have the Israel's reborn, then you have later, and of course you extend this down. So you have your first mountain here, first prophecies, and this has been fulfilled. And we're heading toward the tribulation. But before we get to that, there's these other 2 mountain peaks that kind of build up to this. Well, what if this is a Psalm 38 war? And, Psalm 83. Psalm 83, my Lexdeslia is kicking in. The Psalm 83. Ezekiel 38, Psalm 83. And this one, actually, the stage is set right now for this. And that's what's so scary and what's so interesting. I can say that because I live in Texas and nowhere near this stuff. But but you see it when you're over there. It's like the stage is being set. They're conspiring. That's what it talks about in Psalm 83. They're conspiring. They're coming together. These people are uniting, and their one common enemy is Israel, and really Israel's God. And they're conspiring against Israel, and there's going to be a war. And that would set the stage. And the idea in this book, I won't give away too much and read the book, but the stage is set. If these nations conspire and come against Israel, Israel is not is not going anywhere, and they will defend themselves, and they will defend themselves well. So in Psalm 83, and then the aftermath of this could very well set up a greater Israel. Israel, it stretches all the way from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates, really reconquering a lot of the lands David had in the Davidic Empire, all the way south into parts of Jordan, lots of Jordan, where Manasseh, Gad, and there's another tribe that settled over there. It's half tribe of Manasseh, Gad, whatever. And so this is this greater area, and this would then set the stage for Ezekiel 38, not right away, but within time. And that's the other interesting thing about these prophecies, is that the prophecies don't really tell us how much space is in between each mountain. But I was trying to figure this out mathematically in my head, kind of just guessing. This is all conjecture here. But if Israel, 1967, that's when Jerusalem was retaken, all right? And then the tribulation is 7 years. But Jesus says this generation will see the end. All right? So a generation, let's say the people born here see this. Now, the Bible says 70, 80 years is given unto man. So let's say 80 years, if by reason of strength, and Israel is very strong, this generation will not pass away. So these people could live up to be 100. Doesn't say the whole generation, but people born by this here will see this. Okay, so let's say 80 years. So let's say 80 years. So the tribulation ends in 2047. I'm just guessing. So that means it starts in 2040. All right. So now, the Ezekiel war, apparently a lot of people think this takes place right before the tribulation. It kind of sets the stage for the peace treaty that the Antichrist will offer Israel. Be like, hey, stop being attacked. And of course, Israel shouldn't take it, but they do. But let's say this occurs just a year or two before. Let's say 2038. All right. Now, this war is about to happen. Let's say this happens in the next 5 years. So 2014 through 2020, let's say. In the next 4 to 6, in the next couple of years, this one happens. And then there's a gap of about 20 years, 18 to 20 years between these two wars. Well, in that time, Israel becomes very prosperous. Israel grows, takes the greater Israeli area, greater Israel, and Israel just blossoms in agriculture and commerce. Their military, everything blossoms. And the people, unfortunately, with this war against the Arab states, a lot of people will die. Some people think this is when Damascus will be annihilated, because the Bible talks about Damascus being a haunt of jackals and stuff. And right now, Damascus is one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world, continuously inhabited. So some people think Damascus will be destroyed, which, watching the news, you're like, yeah, that could happen. So if these Arabs, if they unite against Israel, a lot of them will die. And this sounds really terrible. But sometimes there has to be I think back to the American Civil War. There were a lot of people on both sides that were just so gung-ho, and they're so gung-ho to kill their brothers, which is really what the Arabs are trying to do with the Jews. These are their brothers, or their cousins at least. They're so gung-ho, and a lot of those men had to die in the Civil War, and those who survived had to be drained of that animosity. And so by the end of that bloody, bloody war, both sides were like, we want peace now. And all the violence and all the hatred and the blood libel, it had been drained. And so by the end of the war, people were like, the majority of people were like, it's over. And so since that Civil War, we've had peace in America 150 years. And now, so apply that same kind of principle to this war with Israel. The Arabs will be drained. All this hatred, animosity. A lot of those men will die. And unfortunately, innocent men and women will die, and children will die as well. But hopefully it can set a stage for lasting peace with the Arabs. Because then when you get into the Ezekiel 38 war, the Arab countries don't show up in this war. It's Russia, Iran, Libya, some of the further off Arab countries. But not Turkey's in this one here, unfortunately. But in this one, it's the neighbors. In this one, it's further out. Anyway, there's a lot more to it. Definitely encourage you to get Psalm 83 war. The Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, I know is mentioned other wars. I'll try to put a link in below when I find one of the good books on that. But definitely something to consider. And again, the biggest idea I kind of want to leave you with is this idea that prophecy, there are certain conditions, and there's also the prophets never know the distance between the events. So they're describing events in the future as best they can, but as we get closer to them, we start to see things start to fill in. And this is God telling us, hey, I've got this under control, but also He wants us to be watchful, be paying attention. As the sons of Issachar understood the time, so they know what to do, we need to understand the times as well and know what to do. And with if anything close to this is coming about, it kind of lets us know what we need to do in America as Christians and as supporters of Israel. And if you're not a supporter of Israel, consider why. What is the what is the impediment there? What's the hindrance? And really be open to the truth, because I've been thinking a lot about lies lately. Satan is the father of lies, and he's going to lie to the Arab nations. He's lying to them right now. He's going to lie to these people, and Gog and Magog. He's going to tribulation. The Antichrist is going to lie to everybody. Well, I think that's not fair that people are judged because they're lied to. but people choose to believe the lie. And that's something we each are going to be held accountable for. Will we believe the lie? Eve believed the lie. Adam believed the lie. Will we believe the lie, or will we seek truth? And I hope and I pray that I'm a seeker of truth, and I'm constantly holding my opinions and beliefs loosely, not too dogmatic about certain things. I'm willing to be instructed. Now, there are certain things that are kind of the bedrock, the Bible, and there's certain bedrocks we need, or as I mentioned in a post recently, the bubbles, if you will, the Ten Commandments. There's certain things that we build on, but then everything else I can hold loosely. So this could be completely off, all right? That's not the point. But are we willing to receive the truth, even if it goes against what we've embraced and what we've held on to, what we've built our life on? Are we willing to relocate, if you will? Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the book of Acts. Oh, by the way, that's my new ending. For now, we'll see how it works. The reason for that is the book of Acts is the only book that was never actually finished. And so it could, potentially, it could be written. The book of Acts could be 1,000 chapters or more, so who knows? The Bible never says its book is finished. It says Revelations is finished, but, the book of Acts could be continuing on. So that's going to be my little ending from now on until I find something better. So see you in the book of Acts.